which you're giving so many points in scoring that you're undermining your primary objective of achieving best value and best qualifications. So it's a balancing act, and that's why you tend to see these point ranges being lower than things like qualifications and price. Community outreach. Like I said, that this is probably the most important feature. And when you set a goal and you create these scoring preferences, the best way to revitalize your own local base of contractors, even though you can't specifically target your program to them alone, is to make sure that as you have projects rolling out and as you bring in prime contractors, that you make sure they know who your small businesses are, so that when they're putting together a bid or proposal and they've got to pick their electrician and their waterproofers and their drywall companies and their painters, that they know who's out there for them to select, and they're used to working with the same subcontractors over and over again who give them good prices, but they don't know who they don't know. And so these events you can do it in connection with a town hall for a particular project, or just in general having small business expos. It's a way for big businesses to meet little businesses so that they can hook up not only in the prime contractor subcontractor relationship, but for training. Oftentimes, large contractors are willing to come in at their own dollar, and you have one who's willing to do that on the event that we're going to talk about in a second, to train these small businesses on how to obtain insurance and bonding. What's involved in preparing a proposal to compete with a school district. If you're a small electrician or plumber in a community that's not done a lot of public works, you may look at an RFP and just be completely overwhelmed at the amount of paperwork that, well, wait a minute, I just want to put a bid together. What are all these forms and this binder I have to put together? And it can be very daunting. And oftentimes just having the training or the guidance or the mentoring and putting that together can be very helpful for these businesses. Providing training on how they can learn to administer and oversee contracts for public school districts can also be very beneficial. And I know a lot of the big, in other districts and governmental entities I work with, a lot of the big contractors are more than happy to provide this training and guidance to small businesses if you just schedule an event where you can bring them together. One thing the school district can do is maintain an updated small business directory and source list, so that prime vendors looking to do business with you can see who the small businesses are that have registered with your district and what they do and who they're, what they're about, and who they can contact to get more information. Providing information on your website. You already provide information on procurement opportunities and contracting opportunities, but call out specifically the small projects that are more appropriate or would be more manageable for a small business. If you're breaking down those contracts into smaller contracts, highlight small business opportunities, particularly contracts that may not have to be competitively procured. If you want to get quotes, your website is a good way to advertise those smaller projects where you don't have to go in the newspaper, but you're looking perhaps for small local businesses that can step in and provide some of these services. When you have a big project, when you have a big bond project, to have on your bond website page for each program, and make sure that the small businesses know this is when it's going to go out for bid. And these are all of the components of this project, and these are all the trades that are going to be required for this project, so they know ahead of time, and they have time to put themselves out there as a potential subcontractor for the prime contractors who are going to be bidding on that project, especially on CM at risk. When you already have somebody in place, making sure that that project is well advertised before the CM at risk puts those trade contract packages out, that the small businesses know, hey, we've got a CM at risk project, and I, as the small business subcontractor, I don't have to have with this prime contractor, I get to compete and submit my own competitive proposal for this subcontract piece of work, which is one unique feature of construction manager at risk over CSP, where the subcontractors actually get to compete on best value. Bartlett Cock, who is doing elementary 46 and 47, is partnering with Stantec, previously SHW, to put on an event at the Fort Bend Purchasing Warehouse on October 21st. It's specifically for elementary 47 to talk about what that program is going to entail and what the different opportunities are going to be for subcontractors. And this is a great idea. It's great timing because those trade proposals, I think Max said, wouldn't be solicited until next February, I think. So you're way ahead of the curve in making sure that Bartlett Cock knows who the small businesses are who may be interested in working on that project and helping them get all of their ducks in a row before it's time to compete for those subcontract packages. Michelle, do you have anything you want to add on that?
We're excited to expand out on their list. We're soliciting to our 5,500 folks that are on our database, and we're more concentrated on the 1,450 businesses that are construction related and procurement. Also, one note when Mickey was talking about using the website to do quotes, we are currently doing that. You have seen some packages delivered to you that we titled as RF Quote. We do that frequently. Anything that is over $25,000, we put that out on the website to open those opportunities up. We've spent a lot of time and have been very invested in the purchasing department in trying to bring in and recruit as many new vendors as possible. It offers to the competition on the solicitations. So we always encourage that. We've attended other events for the city of Sugar Land and for some other economic groups. And we've enjoyed that representation there, and it reflects in our database. Thank you.
Do you all have any questions for me?
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes, I do. Thank you. That was a great overview, a lot of information. I have a couple questions, actually. I see how this fits into construction. What about maintenance? So if somebody owns an HVAC company and they want to get in on just our maintenance, because we know we have issues with HVAC, and they're already registered on the website, I'm just always getting comments in the community. They're like, I'm always submitting, I never get anything back. What do we do to help those businesses?
That's a good question, and I have to be honest and tell you I could spend an entire evening workshop talking to you about the nuances of maintenance versus public works, because it's a complicated topic. And a lot of times when people say maintenance, it's not just the routine changing the filters and replacing the blown out part and treating the water. Oftentimes maintenance in the real world encompasses replacing equipment, upgrading equipment, repairing equipment, and the law is very complicated in this area and it's very gray in this area, but at some point maintenance becomes a construction project, even though it's still being handled by the maintenance department and coming out of the maintenance budget. And so you get to a certain point where routine maintenance is not just routine maintenance, and the Attorney General's got a very strict definition of what that is. But then you get into the type of project that once it reaches a certain dollar amount, it has to be competitively procured, it has to comply with prevailing wage laws, you have to have payment and performance bonds. So it truly depends on what the maintenance is. If you're talking about HVAC maintenance, that's a service contract. But it's a service contract where the company providing it, they're really only going to subcontract out with other companies if they're doing a substantial repair or a reinstallation, which actually makes it a public works project. So it's a different type of procurement. And I'm sorry, it's a complicated answer, but the short answer to your question is for those types of repeat routine maintenance projects, either a company is going to have to be brought into a cooperative or be a job order contractor if the total amount of work that they're looking to do for the school district is going to exceed $50,000 or be $50,000 or more in an annual year, or in a fiscal year. Then you're getting into a situation where they've got to compete and make a best value proposal to the district to have that work on a repeated basis throughout the year. Does that make sense?
It does, but I
could
don't
I
know if it
add
makes
a
sense
little?
to the small business, but.
It doesn't, and I'll just say, this law changed in 2011. It's probably one of the most complicated changes to the law that happened in 2011 when they took construction services out of the other. It used to be that school districts could keep a long list of annual bid vendors that they could bring in on a time. The legislature did away with that and has forced all governmental entities and school districts to use only the job order contracting procurement method for those small facilities and small construction and maintenance projects, and it's made it very difficult.
So if I am a small company, and I'm just going to use HVAC again, the best way really is for them to get in with a major construction company, as a sub, sounds like.
Or to
And work their
get on a
way-
co-op.
If they're
How
on a
do you-
cooperative, that helps us significantly. HVAC is a good example of what I was just talking about when I was talking about RF quote. If it's under 50,000, we typically put that out there and we try to get as many quotes as we can for the work effort that's being involved on a particular project. We do have some competitive bids that are in place just for the equipment, but as Mickey was explaining, and we've kind of done the road tour many times with other school districts, helping them to understand that the law had changed, and so we can't include the service side of it when they're coming in to change out chillers or to do some of that construction type work, even though it's not really construction. So that's when that RF quote kicks in. We also have the ability within our database to literally go in, and if we're looking for plumbing, we can just literally type in plumbing and get a drop-down list of folks who have said, hey, I'm interested in doing business with Fort Bend. We can pass those over to the department and let them do some review of that and see if there's a company that's qualified that can come in and do the work on the scheduling that we need. So it's a lot of communication on the backside. And then, of course, any vendor, they should absolutely be on that database. It's a whirlwind of information that goes through there. Some of it, sometimes we've expanded because sometimes they were getting solicitation notices for large construction projects and maybe they were just a small sub-type business, but we've expanded the wealth of opportunities there for them to check interest levels. So now we can refine a little bit, and if we just need someone to build fence, we can get a fencing company, or if we just need a plumber, we can get a plumber.
So for example, if they put HVAC, like I know, for instance, someone who owns an HVAC company, and they keep getting solicitations for, band uniforms and,
They might have checked off
music.
several,
They
yeah.
didn't, though.
Oh, okay. Well, I can always look at that. If they'll contact the office, I can help guide them through that because we can see the backside of the screens. We just can't change them, but we can tell them where things might be coming up. But we did recently refine that, and we're getting ready to release out some information to all 5,500 vendors to let them know that it's been fine-tuned so they can very specifically go in and target just a certain area. But if they've clicked on like contracted services, they're going to get all kinds of things from people that we need in the classroom all the way to band uniform services or the design and implementation of those. So we have tried to expand on that, which came with the update of our website, and we're just working on some good language so that everyone understands.
And then for the outreach event for 47, how are we communicating that?
Email. That will,
So
that,
all, on your data, so
We'll pull-
assume you have the small business directory.
we'll pull all of the emails that were listed on the database, and the information will go to them. Sometimes it goes to a marketing department or a bid department, but it falls into wherever they've designated for the emails to come in. We received the information this morning from Bartlett, a nice layout and agenda of the afternoon, so that's what they'll be receiving.
I think that is it. Thank you.
I also found the advertisement for it on Bartlett Cox website.
Yes, they are promoting
There
it.
you go.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well,
That's where I stole their logo.
I'll make sure I try to get the word out too. But thanks, I just think as much education we can provide to our small
Absolutely.
business community, the better, because I don't think they understand
Right.
all the things that go on with education law.
Yeah, it is very complicated. And if you've ever been through, well, I know you have, an audit, one of the first things they do is they say, give me your accounts payable register, and they look for any vendor that you've paid more than $50,000 in that year, even if it's multiple projects that at the end of the year it totaled up to more than 50, and then they want to know, wait a minute, did you know you were going to need this many services, and why didn't you put this out for bid? And so so you may have a fencing project, but by the time you've given that company 5 fencing projects, you've just, intentionally walked into a legal problem. Yeah.
Thank you for those answers. Mr. Rosenthal, do you have a question
Yes.
or comment?
Comments, actually.
Excellent.
Ms. Mickey, you outdid yourself. Thank you. I had all these questions, but you answered them by the time you
Oh,
finished.
thanks.
So, for a lawyer, I guess you're okay. Except for that guy behind you there. I guess, I really like some of your ideas here that you've put down, and I'm kind of wondering is if this is something that we need to kind of put into some policy somehow, that every year, because I really like the training idea, because people don't know, they just think, well, I'm a contractor, how come I don't ever get into these jobs? Well,
Right.
you see how complicated it is. So I really think that this is something that the district should do, at least once a year, and I'm just kind of wondering, if there's some discussion on your evaluation proposal, and, is this something that the district can bring to us? Maybe we adopt that and kind of put that into policy somehow, or your procedure, or,
Yeah, I would see it like we do everything else. I think could definitely have a certain level of policy that the board directs that such a program be established, and some of the high level, and then we develop the procedural aspects of it. That was really one of the points of tonight's conversation, is to kind of get the board's level of engagement. Do you want policy? Do you want us to work it as a procedure and a program? We're open to that. We really want your feedback, and even after tonight, of course, we want to really expose you to it. This is not something we're bringing back next week for an approval or anything like that. We wanted to get the board conversing about it, so that over the next month or so, we can begin putting some, meat on the bones and really roll this out as the new bond
yeah,
program.
I think that'd be great. Really do.
So my suggestion would be, Madam President, is that perhaps we've had the conversation tonight. I would ask that the board give me email, phone call if they have any direct feedback. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of do any further revision, kind of formalize it a little bit more in a document, and perhaps put it on another workshop at some point in the next month or two. And then that will enable us to kind of keep moving forward at a pretty rapid pace.
Okay, so let's hear from the trustees now if they sort of think this is a good idea or not. And then the other question I would have maybe in that context, Ms. Leach, is you mentioned that you've had these vendor outreach events before. And is that something that's in our policy that we are doing, or you're just doing that in your spare time, or? I'd throw that in there.
Spare time.
Spare time. Okay, so it's not really written, it's just something that's come about. It's not written down anywhere.
When this board approved the supplier diversity, there was some language in there that encouraged outreach. I don't think that there was anything formalized. We just took it and ran with it. And,
Okay.
And it was a very successful program, and we enjoyed that time with those vendors. And then certainly, my department keeps open lines with all the vendors so that we can answer questions. They do get lost in the paperwork. It is lengthy, and it's full of acronyms, even though we try to go in, and they still, they need some guidance. And so anyone on my staff is happy to address those questions.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So do we have some comments, Mr. Burdine? Your green light is on.
I was just going to agree that I think it would be a good policy to have in place. And as a small business owner, not in this type of business, but I think it's important that we have outreach and understanding from the community. I approve that type of a program. So.
Okay. That's great. Mr. Rice?
I would agree with Mr. Burdine, and would just like to also consider perhaps putting, in addition to the emails, advertisements in some of the various newspapers that serve different constituencies to help make them aware. And I would, lastly, I think that we have a lot of things that the board has approved, but it's not in policy, so I think it'd be better if we put it in policy.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I agree. Things get lost if we don't get them in the policy. Mrs. Tassan, what would you comment? Thank you. Touche. Just don't turn it upside down. Like I had my name tag on upside down the other day. It's like, oh, what is your name?
I would echo that. I was going to say, I think that having it in policy would be wise so that we can at least put some structure and guidelines to it. Also, these don't have to be answered tonight, but some things that I was thinking about, and you did do a very good job because I had a long list of questions and all of them got answered. So thank you for that. But just some things I was thinking about is how will the small business initiative affect like the design and construction selection criteria? Because we have this 100-point system here, and what are we going to take away from in order to put these potentially 5 points in there would be a question I would have. And my second question would be, you were talking earlier about, so what happens if someone if maybe a primary contractor has the subcontractors who are small businesses at the start, and then as we progress, they tend to fall by the wayside. I would agree with you. I don't think we have a death penalty clause in there, but is there some way we can put some penalty in there if that happens, or if they drop below a certain percentage? Or perhaps, as I was thinking through it, one of the things I could foresee is that if we have the small businesses that are charging one rate and then they switch and get a business who's maybe charging a higher rate, is there some way we can put a cap on what we're willing to pay for those services?
To answer that question first, and then I'll go back to the previous one, your construction contracts already contain provisions where the prime contractor is not allowed to substitute subcontractors without your consent. And we put that in there for reasons having nothing to do with small business, although it serves that interest too. We don't want a bait and switch where you tell us you're bringing in one subcontractor, and then to increase your profit margin, you bring in the C team.
Okay.
So your contracts already contain those provisions. When you have a small business program in place, really the requirement goes one step beyond that, in that if they're going to, if they have good cause for eliminating a particular subcontractor that was a small business subcontractor, they need to try to replace them with another small business subcontractor.
Okay.
And or show why they can't.
Okay.
To your previous question on professional services, not many governmental entities apply these programs to professional services. The reason being is that the level of qualifications and competence is so important in those types of services that not even price is allowed to be considered. And so typically those procurements, which are governed by a different statute altogether, the selection is supposed to be made solely on the basis of qualifications and demonstrated competence. So that's the reason that the goal and the scoring preferences are limited to the construction contracts only and not the professional design contracts.
Okay.
That's not to say you're not going to have the goal. And oftentimes architects, they should be encouraged and can bring in small business sub-consultants to perform some of the engineering work. But you certainly don't want to compromise competence and qualifications on a structural engineer that perhaps doesn't have the experience or doesn't have the capacity within their company to, one, offer the level of professional liability insurance that you need from those engineers, and two, the experience.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George, what would your thoughts be?
Yeah, first of all, I I wanted to appreciate Dr. Dupree to bring this discussion. And also, I really appreciate, Mickey, you explained it in length, and a lot of things I still understanding, but it was wonderful to see the details of it, because when you go out, you hear so many things. So it kind of cleared a lot of things I heard out there is maybe not true, or maybe it is in a different way it has been, described. And I totally agree with, everybody else on the board. We should have some kind of a written policy in place as far as this issue is concerned. And also, ma'am, you mentioned we have how many vendors in our database?
5,500.
How many of them we on a regular basis do business with?
I'd have to go back and do a little bit of research, but we can pull some of those numbers and do a comparison between the people we've actually done business with versus the vendors that are on the database.
Sure. And also, the more vendors we have is, I guess it is a good thing.
Absolutely.
So, and I totally believe in a community outreach in that aspect. And Mr. Rice mentioned more than sending emails, having some kind of newspaper or other advertisement available to, because the reason I say this, because when I talk to people, I always hear this saying that it's very hard to get into the system. And I'm sure every one of our colleagues hear the same thing. And maybe they're not following, they're not understanding what it is, but educating them how they can be part of this. And I think it can go a long way. And also, when we talk about this bond issue altogether, I hear that, why should I worry about it, because my business is not benefiting from it. But when we do communication, when it is out there, and if they didn't get it, that's a whole different thing.
Right.
And
We did widely advertise the last several vendor expos that we did. We worked in coordination with the Fort Bend Chamber and the Central Chamber in the Rosenberg-Richmond area. They allowed us to kind of enjoin on some of their emails. We also did a lot of advertising. We also are fortunate that in the database, there's some names there of organizations, not necessarily businesses, but there are some minority organizations, there are some other minority chambers that take our solicitations and kind of feed it out to their membership. So we do have additional outreach just within our emails, but we will look forward to doing a lot of advertising to stir up the interest.
And especially, this is a perfect opportunity for us to let community know that we care about it.
Yes.
You also, because I think it is important.
Absolutely.
Very good. I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Morris and Mrs. Leach, for that presentation. And I think, Dr. Dupree, we're all pretty clear that we'd like to move forward. So I imagine you can work with Mrs. Morris to come up with appropriate language, and we'll look forward to having that in our inboxes.
We will do that.
Okay. Thank you, ladies, very much. We appreciate your efforts. Our next, we're to closed session. So the board will now convene in closed session for the purpose of a private consultation with the board's attorney on all subjects and matters authorized by law, considering purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, and personnel matters. The board's now convened in closed session.
I didn't hear.